Now, as I said, each and every one of us are different. And of course, each and every child who is gifted and talented is going to be different. They'll each have something that they are brilliant at. They will also, as you saw in that video, potentially have issues because of that. But there are some characteristics that we do see across the board. Now, you're not going to see them in each and every single child. If it was that easy, we'd just do a checklist. This is just kind of an umbrella of who could potentially be picked up. And that's why we're going to look at identification in a minute. We're going to go through the characteristics first. So these children do have an unusual alertness even in infancy. These are the children who crawl first, walk first, roll over first. These are the children who ask why first. And if you remember good old Piaget and his cognitive development and Vygotsky, these are the ones who are doing things earlier than other children. They are rapid learners and they put things together very quickly. I remember having a conversation with one little girl. She was very small and she looked at me and she went, well, why has that tree got leaves on it and why has that tree not got leaves on it? She must have been about 2.5. And we went into the whole conversation of evergreen trees and deciduous trees. And I thought, my goodness, I'm having a conversation about deciduous trees with a 2.5-year-old. And she was making connections to the point of I was like, I'm going to have to ask Google now because I don't know any of the answers. You know, they are really quick thinkers. They have excellent memories. They never, ever forget. But you said 3 weeks ago that we would do this, that and the other. They never forget. And their working memory is amazing. A lot of these children, particularly who have specific academic achievements, have a working memory that can process information, hook numbers whilst they process something else, rotate shapes in their heads that other children can't. So they have an amazing working memory. From a very young age, they have fantastic vocabularies. And you'll see in a video in a minute, they say actually a lot. Actually, did you know? And actually, that's not right. They have complex sentence structures. Children often, go through the stages of language where they babble and then they say one words. These children just tend to go straight into full sentences. They've picked it up, they know what they're doing, they can put a very intricate sentence together for somebody who's so young. So for their age, they are speaking very well. Advanced comprehension of word nuances, metaphors, abstract ideas. They get it. And because of this, they can have amazing sense of humours. Yeah? They can make fun out of all sorts of different words and word plays. Quite fun to be around these children. A lot of them enjoy solving problems, especially those who are particularly good at numbers will love solving number problems. Linguists will like solving word problems, but also musicians and stuff. They love solving and putting things together, puzzles together. Brilliant ideas that other people don't see, that they go, oh yeah, and connect ideas. And we'll come back a lot to connection of ideas when we talk about creativity. A lot of these children, and we'll talk about Dabrowski and his over-excitabilities a little bit later on today, but more when we talk about Twice as Exceptional Children. A lot of these children have deep, intense feelings. They have deep reactions, and they are highly sensitive. And Dabrowski, if you remember his disintegration personality, that, to be that person, to be an amazing individual who has these gifts and talents to develop to their full potential, they have to feel things in very intense ways. And a lot of these children are highly sensitive to emotions, to the environment, to feelings, and they do have intense reactions to stuff. Particularly if something like an animal dies. You know, it's not just that animal dying, but what happens to us when we die? What happens to you, mummy or daddy, when you die? Where do we go? You know, it's not just about one particular thing, it then just evolves into others. So they have intense feelings. These children think in amazing different ways. Abstract, complex, logical, insightful. They don't make the logical mistakes that typically developing children would make, those fallacies. We were talking the other day, and you know, if all trees have bark, and if dogs bark, why aren't dogs trees? Yeah, so that kind of logical or illogical reasoning, they kind of don't have that. Whereas typically developing children will always go through that phase of, well, it's logical, it must be true. Whereas these children question it and go, no, that's not right, is it? They have a very strong sense of justice from a very early age. Everything is black and white and there is nothing in between. Everything has to be fair. And in my household, particularly with my children, who are both on the cusp of gifted and talented, one more so than the other, I have to count out the Cocoa Pops. You know, they have to have exactly the same. And if you tell one child off and he has so many minutes in his room, the other child has to have so many minutes in their room. They, you know, it's black and white. There is nothing in between. They will ask very interesting social and political issues, questions. What's going on in the environment? What's happening? Why is so-and-so saying that? Whereas other children might pick up on it. These children want to know more about what is going on in the world. Very interested in politics from an early age and social, environmental issues. You can see that even from a baby, they can concentrate longer than other children on something that they are interested in. Much longer than other children. And this actually does tend to last a lifetime, this intenseness that they can work at a pace that other people can't. Stay up late into the night without having to sleep as much. And sleep issues sometimes can be a major part of gifted and talented. Some of them are preoccupied with their own thoughts, they're daydreaming, they're wondering why such and such is happening, they're looking out of the window. And I think a lot of this might be because they've done the work, they've got it, they understood it the first time the teacher said it. And they're bored. So they start daydreaming, what if, could I do this? So I think a lot of these children are daydreamers and preoccupied with their own thoughts, predominantly within classrooms, because they are bored. So it comes down to 3 areas that we can collectively put all these characteristics into. Cognitive, that mental ability to think, to reason, to use our logic, to come to conclusions. Affective, which is more about our mood. And then creativity, to put ideas together. So you can see that high level of language ability, the memory, the attention, reading ability, comprehension, logical thinking. Lots of their learning is self-directed. Again, because the pace in classrooms is just too slow for them. They want to go at their own pace. They want to do things in their own way. And actually they realise at quite a young age that adults don't have all the answers. And actually sometimes it's easier for them to learn what they want to learn by themselves. They have quick thought processes. They are extremely curious, and of course that links on to the creativity. They have an amazing ability to use and form conceptual frameworks, so they can think in a different way, using that dialectical thinking, bringing ideas together, comparing and contrasting, coming up with their own way of doing things. These children have amazing sense of humours and unusual emotions, the intensity of those emotions. But I think the most important one here, the one that has the most issues, is perfectionism. These children want to be perfect. They want everything they do to be perfect. And of course that puts pressure on each of them to be that person that the teacher wants them to be. And if you don't understand the concept of gifted and talented, then you're putting even more pressure on this child to be amazing all the time. So perfectionism does have a lot of negative connotations to self-esteem and depression, and we'll talk more about that later. High moral thinking, empathetic, early, develop this internal locus of control. They're very in control of what they want, where they are going, what they need. A lot of them have good leadership ability and are very sensitive to others. And we'll come back to a lot more on Dabrowski later. Now, creativity, we've got 2 whole lectures on creativity because I want you to start thinking divergently. And especially if you're working with these children, to get them to do things as well, to get them to see things and do things that are out of the box. They have high energy levels, and I don't think this necessarily means that they are bouncing around the room being hyperactive. It just means they are persistent in what they do. If you look at Steve Jobs, if you look at Richard Branson, they have that drive to be the best, to do something really well. And that again links to perfectionism. They love ambiguity. They can do things that, it doesn't have to be perfect and right. They love the idea of, oh, what if? Might not quite be right. They have a high tolerance for ambiguity. They have a great aesthetic sense. They love taking risks. If we didn't take risks, where would we be? Do you all know Henry Ford, the car maker, or Ford, the car maker? I remember somebody saying once that if he'd asked people who drove horses and carts what they wanted, they would have said, well, we want faster horses. We want more comfortable carts. But he went, actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take a risk, and I'm going to develop a motor engine. Yeah. If Steve Jobs hadn't put things together and gone, I'm going to do this. Yeah, you need to take the risks, and these guys do that. They are risk takers. Imaginative, good at divergent thinking, so all that links, they see things outside the box, very good working independently, and they are flexible at solving problems. And I'm going to get you to solve some creative problems today. Right, we're going to see now Dan Peters. Now, Dr. Dan Peters is very good and runs a centre for gifted and talented children in California. He does a lot of work with twice as exceptional children. He himself is gifted and his children are 2E. One of them certainly got dyslexia or specific learning disorder and is gifted as well. And he does a lot of work on the social and emotional side of gifted and talented. And he's here talking at a summit meeting, just talking about characteristics. If it's going to work.
Gifted youth come in all shapes and sizes. They don't all have the same things, but generally a gifted youth has several of these characteristics. This list is taken from A Parent's Guide to Gifted Children by Jim Webb and Associates, which is a wonderful resource. Rapid learners learn quickly, can't learn fast enough. They have a really strong memory. They don't forget anything that you did wrong your entire life, and they're going to remind you of it all the time. They have really large vocabularies, especially at young ages. Actually, there's a list on a really good website that actually says, I said actually, gifted kids say actually at a young age. Actually. Advanced comprehension of nuances. They pick up on things. They have more of this adult-like quality where they're able to read sort of what's going on in the room. Now, we know that some gifted kids have none of that, right? So again, we're just looking at the host. Largely self-taught. How did you learn that? Where did you learn to read? We never talked about that. Where did you pick that up? Some have an unusual emotional depth, very deep emotionally, very sensitive, which we'll talk more about, really in touch with the environment, with people, with animals, highly sensitive. They can be abstract, complex, logical, and very insightful. This is something that we see a lot. A really, rigid and strong sense of justice and fairness. In fact, it breaks up a lot of relationships, and you end up having a big target on your forehead when you're pointing out all the time what everyone did that's wrong and how they didn't follow the rules, and you're telling the teacher and you're telling everyone. So it has implications. Some adults do it too. Intense feelings and reactions, meltdowns, long attention span and persistence. At a young age, you're doing things like you can't believe how long someone is sitting and playing alone, or reading alone, or building alone, or imaginary play alone. A tremendous attention span. Often can be preoccupied with their own thoughts, their own world, everything that's going on that's way more interesting in there than what's going on out here. How about this one? Impatient with others. You're not doing it fast enough, you're not doing it quick enough, and you're not doing it correct enough. Ask questions, more questions. Want to know why. We'll talk more about that. They have a wide range of interests. Some kids actually have a specific range of interests that they go really in depth on. You know, they're working on their PhDs at age 6 on dinosaurs. And other ones, they love everything, and they just go from one interest to another. They just bounce around. Highly developed curiosity. How do things work? Why is this like that? I want to know. Tough for parenting, right? Why do I have to go to bed? Why do I have to eat when I'm not hungry? How come you have more power over me? We'll talk about that. Interest in experimenting and doing things differently. This is more the divergence, the creative people that we're going to talk about. There we go on to divergence. And then actually a lot of them have unusually developed sense of humors at an early age. So those are some characteristics to put us in the ballpark of who.
Okay, so those are some characteristics of what is common. However, they differ from one another in almost as many characteristics as they are the same. We are going to talk a lot about cognitive abilities. If we are just looking at IQ tests alone, we're looking at one standard deviation above the mean, and that gets us to an IQ of about 115. So anybody really above 115 could be on the cutoff for high cognitive ability. The cutoff for creativity is about 120. And then the cutoff, again, for those who are really gifted and talented in the profound stage is about 130. So that is a massive array of cognitive ability. Again, language abilities. Those who are going to go off and be the lawyers, those who are going to be the writers, have fantastic language abilities. Those who are going to be musicians and go to the Olympics and play sports aren't going to have those linguistic abilities. They all have their wonderful interests. There's a massive array of those. They all have their different learning styles. And we'll come and talk a lot about motivation, because motivation is very important in children who are gifted and talented. Those who are not motivated do not go on to do anything that is a contribution to society. Motivation is incredibly important, and that's what you guys in the field need to pick up on. Again, personalities. Those who are creative are open to new experiences. Other children will be introverts and not want any new experience at all. A lot of these children have mental health issues, problems with self-esteem, self-concept, self-esteem. They have problems with depression. There are a lot of issues with perfectionism. Some of them have odd habits, odd behaviours. Background and experience, and we'll talk about that when we talk about research. A lot of gifted and talented children that are being identified at the moment come from middle class, that perfect social economic status. They have all the facilities, they have all the money, they have the parents that are pushing them in the right direction. We need to start picking up on those children who don't, but could be brilliant if they had the opportunity to. And of course, this energy level, this persistence towards a goal. So because of that, they all differ in their educational needs. They will all differ in how we identify them. So if we take the specific characteristics based on the Hong Kong definition of gifted and talented, we are looking at these specific areas: intellectual ability, specific ability, creativity, visual and performing arts, leadership, and psychomotor skills. So if we take intellectual ability, these are the ones that on IQ tests will be scoring 130 plus. These are the ones that have the amazing memory, the fantastic mental speed, and we think this comes down to the myelin sheaths within the brain. Those coatings, those electrical impulses are just connecting faster than your typically developing child, which means they're brilliant at problem solving and abstract reasoning. They think quickly, they are efficient, they pick up ideas and skills effortlessly compared with other children. And actually from a very early age, they can be highly focused on bugs, space and animals. And that will tend to be where they end up doing their PhDs or whatever it is they seek out. They will self-learn on topics that interest them. And they will know more about that particular topic than any adult. So, academic skills. Some children will begin talking at 7 months. They will speak fluently. I changed this slide, it obviously hasn't picked up. Okay, they will speak fluently. They will be drawing beautiful, elaborate, really with their fine motor skills that other children won't even have picked up a pencil to like draw all over the walls by 2.5. They begin reading by the age of 3 and are very fluent readers by the age of 4. By the time they've gone to preschool, they're reading books. And of course, that is brilliant because it gives them more input. As soon as a child learns to read, opens a whole world for them. So learning to read is one of the major milestones for these gifted and talented children. For most specific academic skills, you're going to see these maths abilities being one of the most pronounced. Sometimes it parallels the verbal skills. A lot of these children are counting in 5s and 10s before other children even know how to count, 1 to 5. They are doing all sorts of addition and subtraction before you even realise it. And they've never really been taught how to do this. They kind of just pick it up as they go along. It's a real amazing thing to see. Creative. These children think differently. They see things in very different ways. They are insightful. Now, we all have the same information available to us. These children just connect it in new and different ways, and that's what creativity comes down to. They're not afraid of trying something new and connecting things in different ways. They love coming up with their own ways of solving problems and making new connections that are unrelated to each other. We're not talking about just drawing and being creative in that respect. We're talking about coming up with new ways of doing things. And this can be creative in maths, can be creative in science. We're not just talking about, picking up a pen and doing a beautiful drawing. Visual and performing arts, this is where we're talking about more artistic children. They learn to draw early. They have really good visual memories for art, for lines, for aesthetics of whatever it is that they are looking at. They see the beauty in things that other children don't see. They are very good at seeing the perspective. They learn themselves about the shapes. Different from other children. They're still drawing out of the lines. They have an eye for detail. Music ability. Now we'll come on and talk a little bit more about prodigies later, because prodigies are slightly different from gifted and talented children because of the number of hours and usually the parent input as well. But usually with music individuals, a lot of them have been prodigies as kids. They've put in an awful lot of hours. They have had the cello since they could pick anything up, and they've played for a very long time. It is slightly different from just being naturally gifted at music. And of course, good old Mozart composed the concertos and all sorts of things by the time they are very young. So let's have a look at him. This is a little kid, he's so cute, playing the piano, 4 years old.
彈多支筆攤就有5000分，俾啲表情啦。
差你4000。哇！不啲。
收拾心情，收拾心情。好激昂㗎，好激昂㗎，知唔知啊？每一下要撞硬啲石頭。
Listen to him for hours. But think of the memory that he has to do that, the dexterity, the fine motor skills. This isn't a prodigy, this is a talent, this is a gift. It gives me goosebumps just watching him. I mean, it's amazing. You feel it, the passion that is in there. Oh, I think he's gorgeous, just so cute. You know, these kids have, you know, they can see it almost, the harmony, the rhythm, they feel it, you know, that the difference they can hear between the oboe and the clarinet, the timbre, the loudness, just the whole way of what they feel goes into it. It's not just the hours that your mum has made you sit at that piano and made you practice. Yeah, the musical memory, it's everything in one little package of a 4-year-old. It's so cute. Now, leadership. Leadership is interesting. Think of all those individuals that have influenced you, those bosses who have got you to do things that you didn't think you were capable of. I don't think we should talk about politics at the moment. The UK is in an absolute mess. Brexit, Donald Trump and the US and Hong Kong, we won't even go there. But, you know, great leaders can do some amazing things. These are people who are, you know, great in group situations. They understand social dynamics. They can talk you into doing anything that you didn't think you could actually do. You know, they are very responsible individuals. They show good judgment. They're very good at making decisions. Usually they're good at, you know, understanding emotions and sensitivities and, you know, that wording, the linguistic ability of getting you to do something that you didn't think you'd want to do. And they're often persistent. They can negotiate, they influence, and generally they are quite domineering, but in a positive way. And with all of those, the musical ability, the artist ability, even leadership, we have questionnaires. We have ways in which we can identify these children. And there is even a questionnaire for leadership skills. Psychomotor skills, you can just see. These are the ones that have this amazing kinesthetic ability. They know where their body is in relation to the ground. They have great fine motor skills and gross motor skills from a very early age. These are the ones that are doing forward rolls and backward rolls and cartwheels and hula hooping with their eyes closed and doing all sorts of amazing things. I remember watching the Olympics when I was about 14 and being very sad that I was never going to get there because I hadn't had that opportunity to be as good as you could possibly be and have, you know, somebody fund you to go to the Olympic Games. A lot of psychomotor skills who are really good have had the chance to develop their passion at a very early age, and this is the one thing that isn't always picked up on, because it has, you know, if you're going to be the top of your game, you've got to be there by the time you're 16 or 17. Yeah, so this is one of the ones we need to pick up quite early, and I think we are getting better at it, but a lot of this comes down to opportunity and funding. So the one thing that I have repeated, I think, is probably to do with motivation with persistence. This high motivation, this real locus of control, this internal urge to learn, to be in control, combined with their curiosity and their high IQ, can lead to some real amazing accomplishments. So it's not just about IQ. We will start with IQ, but we will continue afterwards. So those children who are about 115 to 120 are thought to be probably in the most well-adjusted. 130 to 160, they're pretty well-adjusted. And then after that, you're going to have some real social issues. There's a lot of research in this. Some agree with it, some don't. This is not true cut-offs. Everybody will be different. The optimum, and we'll look about this in a minute, the optimum IQ is about 119 for those who go on to do really good stuff. But we'll talk about that more later. So common problems, emotional and behavioural. Gifted children are often far more emotionally intense than others. And when we talk about 2E children, we will come back to Dabrowski and his over-excitabilities, because that is a major issue with a lot of gifted and talented children. He you know, does say it can happen in typically developing children as well, but it's a lot to do with gifted and talented. These children ask why a lot, because they are quick and they are logical, and these are the two traits that teachers and parents get very frustrated with. They are faster thinkers than we are, and they're just, you know, constantly wanting to learn more and more input, more and more curiosity, and that can be exhausting for parents. The other problem is the superior humour, problems in the classroom. It's exhausting for teachers. Other children get a bit fed up with it after a while, because it is just, you know, they're still thinking of something to say and this other person has, you know, shot a very exciting joke back to them. So you can see this linguistic ability can actually cause a lot of problems in the classroom. And how many of us, I think we all, probably you're all doing master's levels, have used your intelligence to get your own way with other people who aren't quite as quick as you, who don't quite connect the ideas as well as you. You can use your intellect to win arguments better than any others, and these are the ones that are in the debating societies. So other common problems are social rejection. They feel lonely, they're not accepted by their peers, they feel different, they feel weird, they just don't fit in. Some of them have depression. There are cases of suicide, although it's very difficult to associate that with being gifted and talented. A lot of these children are bored. A lot of these children are frustrated. A lot of these children have very strong feelings of stress and anxiety. They have this idea that just because they're good at one area, that they need to be good across the board. It's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of sibling rivalry. problems that they're, you know, if they're the younger sibling in particular, they're better than their elder sibling. Some of these children, popular, have eating disorders that control. They're trying to control the environment around them, and one thing that they can control is what they eat. And again, I think the most common problem is this on perfectionism. Now, when I have an outside speaker coming in to talk to you, I think it's one of your last ones, she's going to pick up on these common problems to talk to you for quite an hour or so on her experience in her school with these individuals. So we will pick up on these again. So teachers who don't understand gifted children make the mistake that gifted children who are not self-directed, persevering and motivated should not be considered gifted. A lot of children who are gifted aren't particularly persevering and motivated because they're just bored. They haven't got the input, they haven't got the books at home, they haven't got the parents who will drive them to the swim meet. Yeah, so they give up. And that is really sad. Underachieving or troublesome gifted students are too easily eliminated from gifted programs. Those children who can do it but just don't want to, they don't want to be seen as different, they don't want to try, maybe they don't want to be seen as bright, and particularly in the UK and in the United States, these children are the ones who have to be cool. They don't want to be, being bright isn't necessarily cool. That is comes down to culture and the environment of the school, and underachieving is a big problem. And parents often accept all of their children's precocious behaviours, their naughty behaviours, particularly as little kids. Oh, well, he's bright, he's intelligent, therefore he can get away with whatever he wants. And sometimes, because of this, they therefore have problems with stress and depression and anxiety later on. So I want you to have a quick look at this. Look at the QR code. Characteristics of gifted children. There is quite a long list, and it does separate them out into the categories from Hong Kong specific definition. So we're looking at general intellect, specific academic, creative thinking, leadership, psychomotor, visual and performing arts. Just in groups, have a quick look through and see if you can have a look at the characteristics which are related to mood, feelings and attitudes, and those characteristics which are related to adjustment problems, stress and sadness. And if you can tot up which ones you think have the most difficulties, which of the gifted and talented sections, so general intellectual ability, specific academic aptitude or creative thinking, etc., have the most of these. So you do that in pairs, you can do it in groups. I don't mind what you do it in. Is it working? Is the QR code working? Yeah, should get you to this page. Have a quick look through, shouldn't take you long, and then we'll have a little break. You don't have to do it in too much detail. I really just want you to have a look and see which of the categories, the characteristic traits, are more linked and have more issues. You can talk to each other. You don't have to sit in silence. just read through those characteristics and see which ones of them you think relate. There's no right or wrong answer, so don't worry. Which relate to effective and which relate to adjustment problems.
資優學生咧，好多時
其實偷
Just have a quick run through of them all. You don't have to spend hours. I'll give you another couple of minutes just to have a quick flick through.
課堂裏邊咧，可能咁其實資優學生
係可以逆轉嘅。Okay, how are we doing?
Okay, we're going to crack on because otherwise we're going to run out of time today. So if we're looking at the, effective and the adjustments here, a lot of them come up, as we said, with all of them, but predominantly the general intellectual ability, the higher the IQ, the more characteristics you're going to have with effective as well as adjustment problems too. And creativity. Creativity throws up a lot of stress as well as those children who are particularly sensitive. Leadership, not so much. Psychomotor ability, not so much. And music, drama and art, not so much. So it really is predominantly the creative, specific academic and general intellectual ability that have the adjustment problems. But that is not clear cut. Each and every child is going to have their own issues that they need to work through. Now, hopefully, this will... I think this is the right place.
往往因為佢嘅特質咧，喺課堂裏邊咧，可能被人誤解咗。好多資優學生咧，其實咧佢一早已經掌握到課程嘅內容啦。咁變咗咧個內容對佢嚟講太悶啦。咁佢就於是乎開始搞震嘅，上堂開始搗蛋啊咁樣。啲資優生係為咗表現自己與眾不同啦，咁所以特登咧就做啲嘢去吸引其他人嘅注意力啦咁樣，提出好多唔同嘅問題咁樣。咁有啲老師咧又覺得可能你係咪想挑戰我啊咁樣，係咪想落我面啊咁？教師咧應該盡量去了解，盡量去接納佢哋，真係要知道佢呢個行為背後嘅原因，作出一啲合適嘅輔導，了解到個學生佢係邊方面叻咁然之後個問題嘅背後係點樣？咁首先咧，我諗我哋最緊要就係同家長要保持緊密嘅合作，嘗試下睇下可唔可以解決個問題啦。如果解決唔到個問題嘅時候咧，咁我哋咧就可以引入學校嘅輔導人員啦，譬如駐校嘅社工啦，或者係一啲學生嘅輔導主任，睇下佢哋可唔可以一齊去幫手去針對個問題啦。咁如果學校或者辦學團體佢未能夠提供呢個教育心理服務嘅時候咧，咁其實學校嘅輔導人員咧可以去教育局嘅區域教育服務處嘅教育心理學家向佢哋求助嘅。咁另外咧，其實衛生署或者有啲其他嘅志願團體咧都有提供呢啲教育心理嘅服務嘅。咁學校係可以去接觸佢哋嘅。
雖然擁有過人嘅才華，但係因為自我要求高、性格敏感，加上對完美嘅執着，又或者喺學習上面得唔到滿足，都會令資優兒童對周遭嘅不如意事產生負面反應。所以情感上嘅支援，教導資優兒童正確處理情緒，係資優教育入面一個不可或缺嘅課題。喺情意教育方面咧，我哋學校咧就推行過3個唔同嘅計劃，包括情意電影教室啦、演出真我啦，同埋校園小領袖計劃。喺情意電影教室計劃裏邊咧，我哋咧係以電影啦，配合一啲唔同嘅思考性同埋互動活動咧，去幫助小朋友咧建立一個自我嘅概念啦，同埋一個人際社交能力處理嗰個面對一啲困難啊、衝突等等嘅。喺當中嘅計劃裏邊咧，小朋友初時咧就會以一個第三者嘅角度去分析翻故事裏邊嘅人物啦，同埋佢嘅處境係點，進而咧就反思翻自身嘅情況係點，俾佢一個安全感，點樣去表達同埋分享自己嘅感受嘅。咁喺嗰度我哋發覺咧，就幫到小朋友喺佢情意發展上邊有好大嘅幫助啦，包括佢哋嘅價值觀啊、態度啊、自我概念啊、社交技巧啊、情緒管理啊、人際關係等等嘅。
情意教育應該係資優教育必然嘅一環。因為資優生咧對於情意嘅需要咧，其實係比一般嘅學生咧更加大。佢哋嗰個情緒化、對自己嘅要求啊、完美主義啊等等。咁所以無論係課堂內或者外咧，其實情意教育咧都可以支援到，令到呢啲資優生可以喺佢哋日常嘅生活啊，無論同其他人、其他同學嘅接觸啊，或者係對於成敗咧都有一個正面嘅睇法。
Effective education aims at letting the gifted understand their abilities and limitations, have reasonable expectations on themselves, learn how to deal with emotions and defeats, and build positive self-image. Effective education starts with students themselves and then expands to other domains of their life, from self-understanding, good relationship among families and friends, to social awareness. The final goal is to achieve a balanced development within individual and with the community.
Okay. So Hong Kong is actually very good at doing effective education. How many of you want to go on to do educational psych? Yeah, a few of you. There are not many. Not many places on the courses, and you have an awfully big workload. But to go in there and to make a difference with these children, to understand them when other people don't, be brilliant. So yes, okay, I'm just going to talk for about 10 minutes on research, and then we will have a break, otherwise we're not going to get through. So I will go through this very quickly, starting with Catharine Cox and ending up in the modern day. Now, Catharine Cox worked with Lewis Terman, who we all know is the father of gifted education. She started off being his PhD student and was very interested in working backwards. So she got a whole load of deceased individuals who made a massive contribution to society, and she worked backwards and said, well, you know, what is it? What were their IQs? What is it about them and their personalities and their characteristics that got them to be where they were, and their contribution after they died? And what she found was that innate brilliance helped, but was not necessarily essential. And by this she meant, you know, they've got to have something about them, some superior intelligence, but actually these really intelligent, that cut-off of IQ didn't really count. What was more important was being born into and raised by great parents in fantastic circumstances. And that is quite important. The persistence of motive and effort. And she was the first one to really conclude that motivation, determination and persistence were also critical when we're looking at high achievement as well. And this has been replicated in lots of studies. It's not just about IQ. This was one of the first studies that looked at motivation as well. The Goertzels, they were married and they did a lot of work with adults. Again, a lot of this has been replicated. Individuals who are firstborn or only children often go on to do great things. Middle class families, those who have that good social economic status, can afford the schools, the after school care, the enrichment, you know, those violin lessons do not come cheap. These are the people who have houses full of books and then that enriched life. High parental expectations, a love of learning. A lot of these children dislike school. It's boring. There's not enough stimulation. Their teachers aren't, you know, understanding them. They found that these children were self-directed, freedom to be alone for intellectual pursuits. They were left to read books, to learn how to play that musical instrument, to do something that inspired them. They treasured the uniqueness of their child. They had high energetic parents who would do all sorts of things for them and were goal orientated. They wanted their children to go to university. They wanted their children to exceed and excel and do well. And then by the time we get to 1985, we are looking at research that coincides with what we were looking at when we looked at intellectual models of creativity and gifted and talented. This high achievement, this IQ of 190 is optional, because once we go past 120, the correlation with creativity disappears. We need that creativity in order to get people to link things together. There's no point in having an amazingly high IQ if you can't do anything with it. Think of Steinberg and his idea of intelligence. You have to be creative, you have to have a high IQ, but you also have to be practical as well. So this is where other ideas of IQ were coming in. Gardner and his 9 different types of multiple intelligences. The idea that these geniuses were born and made. You could have this talent, but if you didn't have the motivation, you didn't have the chance to experience things, you weren't going to do very much. You weren't going to have a contribution to society. There was also an understanding about this time that traumatic childhood events could create genius. Something happened to your parents, or you were involved in some form of accident. It gave you the drive to be the best in your particular field. It gave you the motivation. Again, motivation, persistence. And this idea of supportive parents, that supportive environment, that chance, that love to pursue a goal and the ability to do it. Lots of child prodigies have parents who are the ones who are, right, you've got to do your homework, you've got to read this book, you've got to do this. So, you know, that whole combination is not just about IQ anymore. And then Sosniak and Benjamin Bloom looked at the home environment, and they looked at artistic individuals, those who had motor skills and cognitive skills. They looked at pianists, sculptors, swimmers, tennis players, and what they were looking for was exceptional kids, and what they actually found were exceptional conditions. And when we think of Gagnet's model, you know, those individuals who are born with a gift, but actually it only comes a talent when they have, do you remember that model? When they have chance and they have the right environment and they have the right parents. So we're really now beginning to realise it's not just about what you're born with, it's about what happens afterwards. A really interesting paper looking at parenting of gifted and talented children, the differences between the US and Hong Kong, looking at Baumrind and her particular parenting styles, this authoritative and authoritarian and permissive parenting, whereas in the UK and in the US we're looking at authoritarian parenting, being the best to get your child to develop into the person that they want to be, particularly with gifted and talented. The difference here is that authoritative parents work because of the culture, and it doesn't have that detrimental effect that that would have in the West. So there are differences in parenting across the cultures because of the way in which, you know, you respect your elders, the conformity, the need for this interdependence and emphasis on academic achievement. So if you're looking at your projects, think about that social, emotional need. Maybe you're interested in parenting gifted children rather than the education side. So if you're interested in parenting, that is a very good paper to read. Okay, this is also a really interesting paper to read. The QR code to it is there, Rethinking Giftedness and Gifted Education, a proposed direction forward based on psychological sciences. It goes through each of these contributions to giftedness. It gives you a little bit of information on each and every one of them. I've done a little roundup for you here, so for those of you who are too busy to read it, I won't say lazy. It's about ability. What contributes to giftedness? Being born into it and having the right environment. Creativity. Having that information but seeing things in different ways, being able to do novel things with that information. You have to have the motivation, you have to have the drive. Those personality traits related to creativity and achievement. Sometimes emotional, trauma, that environment facilitates that creative process. You've got to have parents who are encouraging, who are supportive, and will provide you with the opportunities in the first place. Interests, gifted individuals choose what they like. You've got to have that opportunity, that passion. You've got to love it. The opportunity and chance, financial access and culture as well. What is valued by your society? So that is a real, one page out of a huge big article, But if you're interested, that is the roundup. What contributes to giftedness? These are the main characteristics. Right, let's have a break. Let's do sort of 10-15 minutes, come back out. I can't even see that, my eyesight's so bad. 5-2 or so. And we will look at identification. Anybody's got any questions so far, come and ask me.